suspect was identified as Kerry L. Williams, 43 years of age. 1 minute later, 0510, Sergeant Colton Bevensey and Deputy Reed Livermore arrived, assisted in placing the suspect into custody, and then immediately started tending to Father Gutgsell. And they also started CPR at that time. At 0519, Fort Calhoun EMS paramedics arrived at the scene, attempted life-saving measures, and departed to the University of Nebraska Med Center at 0547, where Father Gutgsell later died. Just a few things about Fort Calhoun. I've lived there my whole life. My brother, who is also the chief deputy, recently retired from OPD, lives there also with his family. My mother lives there. My sister, brother-in-law, and numerous nieces and nephews live in Fort Calhoun. The reason I say that is to let everybody know I consider this to be a safe community. We have an extremely low crime rate, and these 2 homicides in the last 4 months should not define what that community is. All we ask is that the public be vigilant, watchful, and take care of themselves. At this point, I guess we'll take questions.
In the hearing, I'll ask this to the county attorney.
Sure.
So they said that he has no connection at all to the victim or the state. How are you so certain of that?
Well, the information that we have now, this is still an ongoing investigation, and we've got some search warrants out. We've got some other things that we're still looking at. But as far as the information we have now, there is zero connection in regards to Mr. Williams and Father Gutgsell, and so also to the state of Nebraska for that matter. We can't find a connection. It looks like the last we knew, he was working in Sioux City at a meatpacking plant up in Sioux City, Iowa. So right now, the information we have is there's no connection.
So no motive?
Unfortunately, in this scenario, we just had an arraignment. I'm not going to be able to really get into a lot of things in regards to motives or intent or other things like that. I don't know if you've all received the charging documents. If you haven't, I've got copies here before you leave. But at this point in time, we're extremely limited, not to be evasive, but just we're limited in what we can actually say because we've just started that court process and this matter just happened on Sunday. So,
Do you have a pretty good idea, though, even though you can't say?
we have an idea of kind of what the scenario was. Unfortunately, what we've got to piece together is how Mr. Williams gets into the community, what was, kind of his intent of walking around the community, how he gets to where he's at. That's stuff that we're still looking at. And again, with search warrants for cell phones and other data like that, we just can't comment on anything right now.
Did he have a vehicle?
He did have a vehicle.
The autopsy was completed. It sounded like in the affidavit there were some injuries to the Gutgsell's face. Was that the cause of death?
Cause of death was stabbed. He was stabbed several times, and I believe the cause of death was, I know we got it the other day, but it was a result of internal bleeding due to multiple stab wounds, I believe is what it said ultimately.
Do you believe that the father wasn't in a secure place when he made the phone call or when he came in contact with the suspect?
I'm not certain.
Was he in a secure place or an unsecure place, or did he go to confront the suspect?
Well, the information we have is Mr. Williams forcibly entered the rectory, and that at that point in time is when Father Gutgsell was able to approach him and call 911. So as far as a secure place, I mean, I would assume with the forcible entry that there was a locked door, stuff like that.
Can you describe where on Father Gutgsell he was stabbed?
My understanding is that he had a stab wound to the face, he had 2 stab wounds to the back, and had other defensive wounds that were on his arms.
Has the suspect cooperated with the investigation at all?
He's been interviewed. As far as cooperative, I don't know the answer to that. I do know he was interviewed, gave some limited information, but we've also had to make sure to respect his rights, and so from that standpoint, I've got some just limited stuff there. I do know he was interviewed.
Sheriff, could you again describe the manner of which Williams was laying on top of Father Gutgsell?
I would have you refer to the affidavit that was filed at the court when the deputy arrived at the scene.
Is there any inclination to what that situation was about, potentially?
Not at this time. I mean, again, we're still gathering information. I don't want to make presumptions or try to use certain facts in a different way. So at this time, we just wouldn't be able to comment beyond what the affidavit is, which is on file.
Did he have the knife, or was the knife from the rectory, do you know?
That,
We're not ready to comment on that.
yeah, I think we've got to stay on that one.
The affidavit, it described Williams as incoherent. Was there any drug panel done on him? Was he intoxicated?
A drug panel was done. We don't have any results, and so we're still, again, we're in that information gathering state. So we're uncertain. I don't know the answer to that.
What's the next step?
Well, he was arraigned today. It looks like Judge Matney set the preliminary hearing for January 3rd of next year. I don't know if that's the exact date it'll go, so I would encourage everybody to double check because those kind of hearings get moved. If he elects to have a preliminary hearing, then that would be, we had one earlier today, that would be held here. That would be up to the judge then to determine if it's bound over to district court.
And we're going to continue the follow-ups on the investigation, see what we can determine.
Is he going to stay housed here in Washington County?
It's possible. I mean, we can't comment on, for security reasons, where Mr. Williams might be housed or where he might be moved. He will ultimately be in Washington County, but I couldn't comment on that for security reasons.
Cheyenne?
Do you have any info on his past criminal history so far that you can share?
What I can tell you is we know he has criminal history in multiple states. If you look at the charging document, we have information he has at least one felony, which is how we've charged that in regards to the charging document. Beyond that, I couldn't really comment as to specifics of his criminal past, but we are aware that, and I think it was mentioned at the arraignment, that he has multiple records in multiple states.
Does he have any open records in other states right now, or is that something you can't comment?
One, I would tell you, I don't know. We're still looking at that because the criminal history is from different states. They usually read a little bit different, so we've got to check into that. So I actually don't know. There may be a time where we could comment. I just can't right now.
The proper pronunciation of the suspect's first name is?
I think it's Kyrie is my understanding. It's spelled K-I-E-R-R-E, so I believe the correct pronunciation is Kyrie.
Okay.
Sheriff, it seemed pretty important for you to talk about your connection to Fort Calhoun. Are people spooked there? Do you get the impression?
I'm sorry.
It seemed important for you to talk about Fort Calhoun and the safety. Are people spooked there? Do you get that impression?
Yes, and I understand why they are. Like I say, I'm married, I have a wife, she's spooked. Why did this happen? We don't know, but it's still a safe place to live. I'm not going to leave, I'm not going to move, my family's not going to move. Like I say, do not let these two incidents define who and what Fort Calhoun is.
Will you be keeping a closer eye on the transient population due to these two cases?
We don't have a lot of transient population. We don't have homeless camps or homeless people camping out or hanging out in the area. We just don't have them.
Williams is described as being from Sioux City. Would you describe him as a transient or?
I don't know that he's from Sioux City. We don't have information. We know that he has visited several states before coming to the state of Nebraska, or at least driving through. I really, the transient word is probably something we wouldn't use because our information is he had a job. We just don't know where he was living. We're not certain. You know, we've spoken to members of his family in order to kind of ascertain what happened prior to these events. But I don't look at him as a transient individual. He actually purchased a car in Texas, you know, and so I guess I wouldn't use that term.
Yeah, at this point, I would not classify him as a transient until we determine more exactly what his lifestyle is.
Is there any knowledge that the victim being a priest played a role in him being a target?
There's no indication of that whatsoever.
As far as how he broke in, do we know more about how he did?
We know how that occurred, but we're not ready to comment on that yet.
And the rectory was locked. Is that correct?
We're not ready to comment on that yet.
If you're
We're hoping to release more information the further we get into the investigation, such as the how and why.
If you're prepared, do you have any comment on the court proceedings yesterday in the Linda Childers case?
You have some questions? It's easy for you to question, and I'll answer the questions as best I can. I knew Linda; she was a good friend of mine.
I mean, we certainly could. It was a preliminary hearing. Judge bound it over to district court. I mean, that's what I can tell you happened on yesterday's hearing. I think there was some news footage that you could watch and see. Again, to me, it's always best to have the information from, there were witnesses that testified, yesterday. For us to interpret that, I think, I would go to the source, and I would look at what the witnesses said.
We're kind of two similar break-ins. Are they facing similar charges? Is there any difference in the charging decisions?
No, currently both of the individuals are charged with the same things. Mr. Collins had some extra charges that are not present here, but otherwise, as far as the first degree murder, they're charged the same way.
Being an area resident, is there advice that you would give to the average person living in our area right now in terms of making themselves a little more secure?
I think people need to remember we border the largest metropolitan area of the state, about 1 million people. We're 8 miles from the city of Omaha, 8 miles from the interstate. We've always been that way. Lock your doors. Just be vigilant. Take a few extra precautions, whatever you want to do. And if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to call the sheriff's office. Don't be afraid to report something you may be considered suspicious. Call it in. We want those calls. So just be a little extra vigilant. Watch out for your neighbors.
Is Fort Calhoun a town where people don't typically lock their car or home doors? Because I know small towns are like that. Some are.
Well,
so I'm
depends on
wondering.
how far back you want me to go. It used to be yes. But in recent years, everybody's locking their cars now. Everybody's locking their homes now because of the society we live in. Not just because it's a high crime area. It's not. It's just people feel more safe.
And do you have any, I know you're trying to piece together the timeline of where the defendant was before he went to the church. Do you have any knowledge that he was spotted in the neighborhood, in other neighborhoods? Was he trying to get into other places?
We're following up at the lead that comes in. At this point, we don't want to comment on that.
Okay.
You had mentioned that you'd spoken to Williams' family. Did they mention anything about a history of mental illness, a history of drug use?
We have had interviews with the family. We couldn't comment on that, and so that's another thing. Again, we're waiting to get information. We've done some tests, looking at diagnostics. That's more of a question for a defense attorney, I would suppose. But I couldn't comment on what the family members have said to law enforcement at this time.
Without having to look up all the criminal history in every state, can you kind of summarize some of the criminal background in various states?
Unfortunately, not at this time. Again, that goes to the arraignment process and what we've got going on here. To talk about his criminal history might be prejudicial at this point to Mr. Williams, and so we just won't comment on that at this
You
time.
didn't tell that to the judge, though, that he does have a serious...
Yes, Eric Peterson, my chief deputy, did the hearing on Zoom. He had mentioned to the court that there was a lengthy criminal history from several different states, and that was a decision I believe the judge took under advisement when he set the bond at no bond. Any other questions? Okay. Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. And
Just call us news.
I can do that. I can do that.
I do apologize for the mix-up in the emails I sent out yesterday. I know it was very confusing. My fault.
No worries. Thank you, Sheriff.
Yeah, this was a complicated deal with the Zoom, so we're a little bit limited here
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
in our ability to do some of that.
Yeah.
Do you guys usually do Zoom, or?
I'm sorry, you guys usually